Okay, so today's review lesson, lesson number 86 of Workbook of A Course in Miracles, and we're reviewing lessons 71 and 72. Only God's plan for salvation will work. It's 71, and 72 is holding grievances as an attack on God's plan for salvation, and I noticed that this review lesson is, in a sense, it's an appeal for sanity to the insane, actually. And it's trying to get you sort of as a recapitulation of your own past experience of what we call life on planet Earth. It is senseless for me to search wildly about for salvation. I have seen it in many people and in many things, but when I reached for it, it was not there. I was mistaken about where it is. I was mistaken about what it is. I will undertake no more idle seeking. Only God's plan for salvation will work, and I will rejoice because His plan can never fail. And we all know this to be the case. We know how there have been times in our life when we thought, because it's true, I mean, obviously the reason why we think it is because somewhere inside of us we know it's true. Somewhere inside of us we know that there's a life that we're meant to lead that isn't the life that involves struggle to survive, only to later get sick and die. We know that the tension that we experience just in trying to make it through the day doesn't feel right, doesn't feel like this is what God had planned for us. And certainly if God had this plan for us, then we wouldn't really want a whole lot to do with that God. And there's underlying reasons for those things to be thoughts that you're thinking, because obviously somewhere inside of us we know, because we were created that way and we've merely forgotten. It's not that the truth isn't in us. It's not that the truth isn't constantly active, in a sense. Creation, it's not that creation isn't constantly active and we are part of that creation. That is the core of our being. And because of the nature of that creation of our reality, it is true that we do somewhere inside of us know that this was not the life that God created us to live. And somehow we search for that life, trying to find it in the world of space and time, and where it can never be found. It's senseless for me to search wildly for salvation. I have seen it in many people and in many things, but when I reached for it, it was not there. We've seen in situations what we thought, if we had or if we could achieve, would change everything entirely and end the futility or the drudgery or the hostility or the inability to cope that we experience in our daily life. And there's good reasons why we can't cope. We can't cope with this world because, first of all, it's not a climate. It's not the climate that God created for His Son to be eternally happy and infinitely abundant in. Only the condition where the grace of God is operating is right for the Son of God Himself. And obviously this world is not operating by the grace of God. There's no evidence of it based on what we see in the news and what we live through during the day and what goes on things that we think we need to do in order to just get by and make it another day, another year, another week until we die. Um, and so buried deep inside of us is what we truly are, and the nature of what we are is perfect. Perfect. It's whole. It's lives. Our soul lives in the state of being fulfilled, because it cannot not fulfill its function as God created it. And what we're faced with is a life here that in no way seems to allow us to match up, to match that, let's call it, vibratory frequency of energy that's buried deep inside of us. That is the totality of our reality that God created us to extend. And we know somewhere that we're not really fulfilling our function, because we're not really satisfied with the life that we're living. And we get moments of satisfaction, but they don't seem to last. Or nor most times do they have anything to do with how we're living our life. They seem to be haphazard. And this is what is brought to an end when we do begin to recognize where our salvation comes from and how our salvation is accomplished in our recognition and realization of the fact that we're saved. And then, in retrospect, it all seems to make sense when you have that experience. And I know that there are those of you out there who have had the experience of being saved, when finally, all of a sudden, and in a moment, when you're ready, and that readiness, I suppose, is somehow tied into the willingness to no longer see salvation where it is not, and having been so disillusioned by attempting to find it where it's not and seeking for it where it's not, and thinking that we found what we sought only to have it slip away. The experience of salvation is finally tied to a moment in our mind when we give up seeking for it entirely in the world, because we've realized it's not there. It's a myth. It's a myth. There's no salvation in the world because the world has no reality. And it is from the lack of reality of the world, wherein which fulfillment and joy cannot be found, that we are saved, when finally our heart and our mind seek for salvation where it is rather than where it is not. And that experience comes to show us that we've in fact always been saved. We've just been using, let's call it, the attributes of our soul, heart and mind. We've been using the attributes of our soul, our hearts and our minds, in a manner that would not allow us to find it. And we can see, as some of the forms, some of the specific applications that Jesus is suggesting, all point to the choice, that we always have a choice, and choose we must. Choice is the last. It's interesting. I was sort of looking at it the other night, in the will of God, the will of God, which we're created as. We are God's will. We are one with God's will. We are the extension of God's will, and in that sense, we use the power of God's mind to dream this dream. And within the dream, the reduction of that power comes down to we have a choice that we need to make. God's plan for salvation will save me from my perception of this. This is no exception in God's plan for salvation. Let me perceive this only in the light of God's plan for salvation. I am choosing between misperception and salvation as I look on this. If I see grounds for grievance in this, I will not see the grounds for my salvation. This calls for salvation and not attack. Now, notice we don't have to know what salvation is. We just have to be willing to choose for it when we have the recognition that a choice is available to us as to how we're going to look upon the instance, the situation, the event that we find ourselves as part of. Holding grievances is an attempt to prove that God's plan for salvation will not work, yet only his plan will work. By holding grievances, I am therefore excluding my only hope of salvation from my awareness. I would no longer defeat my own best interests in this insane way. I would accept God's plan for salvation and be happy. That's what I was saying. It's like, this is an appeal to the right mind in each and every one of us. This is an appeal to the sanity that somewhere deep down inside of us must be there, or else the insanity wouldn't seem insane. We'd have nothing to compare it to. There'd be no truth inside of us that would be sort of nagging at us, trying to get our attention to look where answers can be found rather than continue to seek answers where they can't be found. There would be no true, whole, perfect, creative energy that we were wholly part of. If we didn't have that in us, then the insanity of the world, we'd have nothing to compare it to. We'd have no way to say it's crazy. We wouldn't have, and this goes to the idea that the Holy Spirit induces discomfort to show us that we need correction. It's sort of the same idea. The Holy Spirit, the Spirit of wholeness, the Spirit of God that we brought with us, unbeknownst to us, because God would not leave us comfortless. That Spirit of wholeness, that Spirit of God, that Spirit of creation, that Spirit of the oneness and the unity of God mind thinking. It's within us. And we have the ability to choose for it. We don't have to know what the outcome is going to be. For if we did, it would be no choice. But we do have to choose based on the comparison of the fact that we know that there's sanity, because we feel how crazy the world is. We know that sanity must exist somewhere, so we search for it every place but where it is, and then finally when we give up the search for looking for it for where it is not, it begins to dawn on us in and of itself. And these are just reminders of how to use the world that we find ourselves to be part of as a mechanism, as a device, as a school, as a classroom, as a place of learning, how to begin to make the right choice. How do we approach the situation that we find ourselves in? And the situation that we see, for a moment, we're in the world of space and time. We're in the world, and we've gotten up this morning and we've read the lesson. And we're going about our day, and all of a sudden, we're faced with a situation. It's brought to our attention by the Spirit of wholeness within us rising up and causing a discordance because something isn't fitting. Something's not gelling. Something's not in alignment. And that lack of alignment is the key, is the ability for us to go to the spot in our mind where we can choose when we feel that. When we feel that lack of alignment, when we feel that discordance, when we feel that lack of integrity. Because the truth is always and ever trying to make itself known to us. So in the midst of a moment where there's falsity, The truth is telling us, wait, stop. Here's a place where you can choose again. And this is what your choices are. These are the nature of the choice. I am choosing between misperception and salvation. As I look on this, which would I rather see? Which would I rather learn of? If I see grounds for grievance in this, I will not see the grounds for my salvation. Which would I rather learn of? And our mind being the powerful, let's call it agency that it is. What we choose, ask and you shall receive. What we choose, we get the result of the choice that we make. We must get the result of our own thinking. So if we begin to think along the lines of situations that present themselves to us each and every day, that we're really not seeking a solution in the world based on the world's terms of what we think and the world would think would be the best outcome in the given situation. When we begin to look at the situation with the idea that each situation is designed to offer us salvation for ourselves and salvation of the world, so that a happy outcome is available for everyone that does not block the way to their own experience of salvation. And finally, we can make decisions utilizing the Holy Spirit that eliminate the experience of guilt and fear for further retributions for making wrong decisions, which has plagued us since the beginning of time. Second guessing because we make decisions and they give rise to more problems. Well, choosing with the Holy Spirit based on God's plan for salvation is the elimination of the problems that keep on cropping up, because we're no longer seeking answers where the choice results in further fragmentation and the continuing need to solve problems, because the problems of the world are designed to keep the solution of salvation from us. And the more we choose the solution in the world of space and time, the more we verify the fact that we actually have the problem. But God's plan for salvation doesn't do that. God's plan for salvation, when we choose it, shows that the problem we were attempting to solve has no reality within the kingdom, and that we've never left the kingdom. And then we can begin to walk about as a passerby, recognizing where our real home is, understanding why we're here and what is occurring, and being able to continually make the right choice for salvation in the midst of a world where it's asking us to perceive it differently, perceive it as a prison house. And that's God's plan. So holding grievances would be an attack on God's plan, because it would keep the plan from us. And the ego actively wants you to attack God's plan for salvation, because God's plan for salvation, it brings about the inability for you to believe the lies of the ego any longer, nor want to cast your fate with it. You'd much rather cast your fate with in the winds of salvation and let them gently blow us home again. So today, recognize that within you there is a sane voice, and it's an appeal being made to the sanity of the true voice that comes from the spirit of wholeness, that can allow you to see the totality of solution in each and every place where previously you thought you were being offered more death, more sickness, more pain, and more of what the world had to offer. Today, and from today on, let's remember what the real choices are and begin to use the power of our mind to make choices that will help not only us, but will help all of our brothers and lighten the load, and give them the ability to see clearly so that they can choose salvation too along with you. And in that we are all saved.